In this episode, we're taking a look at the career of 70s and 80s hitmakers Chicago. And we may even reveal what the song 25 or 624 means. Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. Thank you for joining us. If you're new, welcome aboard. If you've been with us for a while, we thank you for your continued support, and we look forward to that in the future. We're pre-thanking you for future episodes, Eric, right?
That's right.
We're laying a little guilt. We're
always looking ahead, guilt. Looking over the fence.
Like cream cheese on a bagel, we're spreading on a little guilt and thanking you in advance. This way you kind of feel a little compelled and be like, oh, okay,
right.
You know.
Okay.
They already thanked me for it.
So way to hook them in.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. There's one way to do it. And if you're listening to us on a mobile device, more specifically Spotify, you can give us a rating. You don't have to write anything, but you can just swipe over 1 to 5 stars.
Yep.
5 stars is the best. And we're the best.
Dean
so we deserve
sets the bar high all the time. Give us the 5 stars. Why not?
That's it. That's it. Wayne Gretzky famously said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Right. Okay. So we got to take the shot.
That makes sense. Yeah.
We'll take the shot and
sure.
And thank you in advance for your 5-star review as well. So, and then another thing, we've got our YouTube channel really rocking and rolling. We're putting previous episodes up there on a pretty regular basis, so you can check those out. It's a lot of fun. Plus, we've got I separated out our trivia nights because we've been starting to do trivia nights, and you can do those even though we've had the episode. You can roll up that trivia night and keep score. The questions are there. You know, we go over the answers afterwards, and you can kind of keep your own score. You can use it to host your own trivia nights. We've got 3 of those separated into a separate playlist, so you can find that there as well. So we're just reaching all the different arms of multimedia.
Yeah.
Next, Eric and I are gonna do an album of ballads and duets.
Well, that's news to me, but okay, that may be. But
is that an overreach? Is that an overreach?
Sure. Why not?
Well, they got auto-tune. I mean, how bad could it be? I mean, you hear these artists are getting auto-tune, slap a little bit on me, and I'm like the next Tony Bennett.
Yeah, why not? Sure.
Or maybe the next Peter Lemongello, perhaps.
Man of many hats. Yeah.
Yes. Not wearing a hat today, though, oddly enough. No. Usually I wear a hat for these episodes, but yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. It's cooling down. Weather's cooling down a little bit, so I'm not sweating like a maniac. So it's
I am.
We're entering fall. Hopefully.
Yeah, it's still I live further south, so it's still a little steamy out there. And
no doubt up here too, but it's kind of calming. I'm calming down in anticipation that September's on its way. So I'm looking forward to
the best time of the year.
The leaves turning. Yeah, no absolutely.
Yep.
It's already pumpkin spice season. If you're a Dunkin' Donuts fan, they've already busted out the pumpkin swirl. They've got the pumpkin donuts. A little free ad for Dunkin' Donuts here. They're not paying us.
Dunkin', it's everywhere, man. It's you go to any supermarket, you got pumpkin cereal, you got pumpkin flavored Oreos, the whole bit. You know
what they don't have? Pumpkin spice deodorant for men, roll.
Ironically enough,
there probably is. I shouldn't say that.
No, there is something. There are some pretty odd things out there. I was actually at the store today buying some stuff and shampoo and whatnot. And not that I need shampoo, but
yeah. Well, I was going to say, what are you doing with shampoo?
For my son, he needed some, so I had to pick up some for him. But yeah, there was some odd scents there, and in the body wash and in the deodorant.
Yeah, I'll take a pumpkin spice.
What's up with that? Yeah,
scent.
Why not?
Why not?
Cinnamon
right?
or
deodorant smell like pumpkin spice. Forget it. You'd be the most popular person at work.
It's like tea, like green, like honey tea, and I don't. Does that even have a pungent odor enough to smell good?
Why, right? So for people that don't want something overpowering, but they don't want unscented. So we're going to be launching a new deodorant here. We're going to be, we're going to have a new podcast called Men's Healthcare and Body Care. So that podcast
this is the pilot for that, right?
This is like this is like when the characters make a cameo in a series, then they get their own pilot. That's what we're dipping our toe in the waters of men's personal care.
Yeah.
Don't think it's working out so well. So we're going to stick to what we know. We're going to stay in our lane of music and movies. And in this episode, we're going to be doing another kind of career spanning episode. Some of these are fun. Some groups kind of fit more towards something like this than a specific album. And I think Chicago is one of those groups.
No doubt.
A very prolific group, but they didn't have, at least not until the 80s, they didn't have that one. You know, like they've had number one albums, but there was not, you can't pick one out because it's so damn hard because they're not titled. 99% of them are numbered. So you got to know what one you're talking about.
That's right. It's kind of like the Peter Gabriel thing, right? Where it's just self-titled and there's
at least Chicago had enough respect to put a number after it.
Put a number, right. Out, the Roman numerals. Yeah.
Gabriel was just like, I'm going to call each one Peter Gabriel. And you sort it out.
It's from my album, Peter Gabriel.
If you really cared, you'll sort it out for yourself. But Chicago is one of those groups. So we're going to kind of do a little bit of a career overview, mostly 70s, a little bit of 80s. Very interesting career trajectory. Eric has made no bones about
very little 80s
about his distaste for their 80s output.
I am
and you can
make
and we will make a strong case that this is almost a tale of two bands.
Yeah. No doubt.
Yeah. You know, and there were some tragedies that happened. And again, we can't have an episode without some acrimony. We will have a Jeff Lynne reference as well here. There's a connection there. So we're gonna bring out we're dragging out all of our greatest hits for previous subjects of Rock and Roll Hall of Fame animosity, Jeff Lynne, and the career of a group that's really, I've really been getting into them a lot recently. It's easy to take them for granted. Would you say that?
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, absolutely. Back in the day, I think it was around the 80s is when, we started getting into music. That was supposed to be our decade. And here I am, like I've always said, getting into the older stuff because I just, frankly, I think there's nothing finer. But, like you say, there wasn't one specific album that you could really dig into. It was more or less the greatest hits package. And I had pretty much, you figured that's it. That's all this band really is, but there's so much more.
Yeah.
And we just never knew that at the time.
And that's what I'm learning
underrated.
Now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm in the process of educating myself about Chicago now. Like I said, I think I said it in one of our previous episodes. It might've been a top 5 or something that, back in the 70s, there were 3 things on the radio: Elton John, Paul McCartney, and Chicago. Like those were like the 3 standard bearers of like pop, of like stuff you heard on AM radio. It was pretty much those 3 throughout the 70s. You consistently would hear something from Elton John, Paul McCartney, or Chicago. They were always hitting the charts. Maybe not always number 1, but they were kind of the framework of pop music soundtrack of the 70s. Of course, you had other bands, but they were always, and Chicago was one of those, always consistently hitting the charts, but never one album that's got 5 or 6. Like we've talked about Billy Joel, and we've talked about some other albums where it's like the one album has you can kind of point to this one as the one you can start with. Chicago doesn't really have that.
Typically speaking, they would have like, and the hits that did appear, or maybe 1 or 2 hits, were not really, didn't sound necessarily anything like the rest of the album. And especially that was the case with the first 3 of their records, which was just total like jazzy. I would even argue it's jazz fusion. It's like jazz rock. It is
experimental.
It's experimental. It's improv.
But and I was thinking about that today because I knew you were going to probably say that. I knew you were going to. We absolutely could not start to talk about them without it. We still have stats. We still have stats to go into too, by the way.
Okay.
But when I was thinking about it, right, because you said like jazz and fusion and stuff like that, but not like Steely Dan.
No.
Right. This is like a different segment of, Steely Dan was cultivating or working towards a different sound that was jazz influenced and had elements of jazz fusion, whereas Chicago in their early days was more like almost like ripping off a Band-Aid. It was very raw.
It's raw. It's powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. It was kind of like
it's rock.
I sent Eric a link to a concert clip, and I'm going to probably put it in the show notes of them doing 25 or 624, and it's just absolutely raw and just raucous and almost unhinged. Like the guitar playing is almost so unhinged, but it's in control. So we're going to get to that. Let's do some stats, because I think we really need to set the table. I think there's going to be some mind-blowing stats here for as Dennis DeYoung would say, for Chicago. They were formed in 1967. They were called the Big Thing. Then they changed to Chicago Transit Authority in 68. Chicago Transit Authority wasn't too happy with that. Like, you can't really use that, the name of our transit system. So they just shortened it to Chicago in 1969. Self-described as a rock and roll band with horns. And that's pretty much what they are.
I would say so. Yeah.
Pretty much what they are. They've sold over 100 million records worldwide. 23 gold, 18 platinum, and 8 multi-platinum albums. I mean, these guys just keep... And when we go into their early stuff, I don't even know how they could maintain this level of output. Billboard ranked as number 13 for Hot 100 singles chart success. 21 top 10 hits, 5 consecutive number 1 albums, and 11 number 1 singles across the top 100 and maybe adult contemporary. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2016. Very late to the dance. Very late to the dance. I don't know how.
But consider the army, the virtual army of members that this band had too. Like
Good. Let's do that.
Revolving door.
Well, let's consider that.
I mean,
we're going to talk about the classic lineup, because the classic lineup really was from the 70s until the early 80s, with one exception because of the one member passed away. But they were really a self-contained unit throughout. They really had that all for one for all mentality. Because of the uniqueness of how they came up together, where they came up in Chicago, what the like-mindedness that they all were of, first they were a cover band. So they were doing like Tom Jones, stuff with the horns, they, when they got booked in clubs, because they had a horn section, their covers were like that lighter stuff, right? Because you have horns, and they were like, well, we don't want to do that. We don't want to keep doing it. So they all like unanimously decided, we're going to put that away. We're going to strike out on our own. And when they did, was the lineup, is what we'll call the classic lineup, was Peter Cetera on bass and vocals. You had 3 vocalists. You had Terry Kath on guitar and vocals. You had Robert Lamb on keyboards and vocals. Then you had Walter Parazader on woodwinds. He would do like sax and flutes. James Penkow, who looks a lot like James Caan, on trombone.
Yes, he does.
Right? Lee Loughlin on trumpet, and the great Danny Serafin on drums.
Oh man! Oh
yeah. These early performances, if you go look on YouTube, these guys were really just killing it. Like it was an odd bird, especially considering that they formed in 1967, started recording in 68, and you were seeing, kind of the end of the hippie era, and for a band to come out with horns, but then a really scorching guitarist was something of an odd duck. Not like Blood, Sweat, and Tears. We talked about them recently with the horn section, because on our top 5, one of your choices was that group Ides of March, and that's a brass centric song, right? Vehicle, and it was around that time. In that era, so we started to see those splinters of these subgenres of let's add horns to music. Let's add we'll go with ELO. Let's take it from a classical music standpoint. So there was all these experimentations with rock and roll, but then what can we do? Prog. Let's add some more freeform, keyboard heavy, synth heavy. You started to see all these different splinters of genres come out, and Chicago kind of carved their own path.
Yeah, they absolutely did. I've always admired that anyway. In the late 60s, you had, Traffic, and you had bands like, incorporating flute and strings or horns or whatever. I mean, and the more exotic they got, the better. I don't know. There's something awfully cool about that. It's that you could take these instruments that are considered passé or, like of another time, like they're automatically deemed, ancient,
not hip,
were, and not hip. Right. And put them in a rock and roll band and see what you can do with that. And sometimes it worked. A lot of times it worked. Sometimes it didn't work. But It depends. And I've always admired the musicianship of this group, especially that early period, man. They just busted out with that stuff. And it's my probably my favorite type of music in general. I just love that period of that, like you said, like that rawness, that heavy rock and roll that just came out. And it wasn't like really loud, like heavy metal type rock, but it was because you had these instruments in there to kind of like balance it out. So you just had sort of that
anything went
like it was that lush sound. Yeah.
Yeah. The late 60s, early 70s, anything goes. Like artists were being signed that, you had horns, strings, singer-songwriter, like anything went. Like they would just throw anything against the wall. And if you were able to make a go of it, you just created a new subgenre of rock and roll. Like that's literally how it happened. Like there was no thought of the record labels didn't say, okay, well, we're going to have like kind of horns with rock and roll here. And we're going to have, horns, rock and roll with cellos. And we're going to have, it's just these different artists took all their different influences and incorporated, said, well, we want to do a rock and roll band, but we're also have 3 horn players. So let's push them together and kind of do what we really like. And the thing about Chicago, right, is they're known for their horn section. What they're not known for is their guitar playing. And that's I think the advocation we're going to do here is the criminally underrated Terry Kath. You need to go. You're not going to see it if you watch like official music videos. You need to kind of listen to some of that live stuff that Eric was talking about, where it's raw. Back in the day, late 60s, 67, 68, Hendrix came to America. Chicago, I think, was out on the West Coast, Whiskey Go-Go, any of those things. And Hendrix went and saw Chicago. And essentially, as the legend goes, Hendrix said, this guy's a better guitar player than I am, about Terry Kath. Like, where did this guy come from? How does, and what's he doing? Like, criminally underrated because he was in a band where the horns were such a focus of it, that had he been in like a Cream or a trio of his own, might have been a different scenario for him.
Could be, yeah.
He's just a beast. He was a beast on, like, oh my God.
Oh yes, yeah. He's his technique too. Just watching him play,
I don't know what his technique is. Like, it's just,
that's the thing.
He's so fast. You can't even keep track of. Like, honestly, he's so fast, you almost can't keep track. It's like, how does this guy? And when I'm watching footage of him, he doesn't really look at a lot of guitar players will look at the fingerboard, see where they are. He is like shaking his head up and down. He just,
his eyes are closed most of the time. He knows with the instrument exactly what he's doing.
With the instrument, absolutely. So, if you come out with nothing, it's that, Terry Kath was really the unsung hero, and he essentially was the leader of the band, and he had a great soul. He had the most soulful voice on Chicago. Color My World, Make Me Smile, the collaboration that Chicago did with the Beach Boys, Wishing You Were Here. Yes. He's got like this voice that just, I think Robert Lamb, one of his co-band members, called him a white Ray Charles.
I
so that's the kind of voice he has, like that.
I could see that.
Soulful. Peter Cetera's got a nice, really kind of refined voice. He made for pop music. Robert Lamb, who sings like Saturday in the Park, another smooth vocalist,
soul. Right? Which I prefer.
Terry Kath has like as gritty as his guitar playing is. He's got that bluesy, gritty, soulful voice that matches the style of music that he was into, which is just make me smile.
Think
I love that song.
Do you think the size of the band might have had a factor in, because typically in these situations, I mean, you want to say that players, how much attention do they really want? Are they giving their all for the sake of being noticed, or are they doing it for the band and they playing only what they need to play, what's good for the music, that kind of thing? I think there was a lot of that, like, sort of like, I should say, maybe a little bit of ego going on. I think, there was a lot of like, I could hear some players kind of overplaying one another at this time. This was a time when a lot of this stuff was new and brand, and people were just out there to prove themselves too. So don't forget, I mean, you hear this kind of thing for the first time and you're like, what was that? People like Hendrix came on the scene and and it just seemed like there was just one band after another that was kind of just taking it and run with it. And
well,
so
I
don't know.
I think in the case of Chicago, since there was only one guitarist, there was only one person bringing those thoughts right to the table. And there was only one keyboardist, and there was only a set of horns. So I think as a unit, I think they were segmented perfectly, where you didn't have two guitar players like battling it out, and then it gets to be like noise. It's like Terry Kath is the only voice you're going to hear on the guitar. It's going to be a consistent sound. Robert Lamb will handle the keys, and then the three guys will handle the brass duties.
It's I can only imagine how difficult it must be to be in a band that big, because you got harmony vocals going on. You got everybody has to be in sync, and it's very difficult to do. It's hard enough for a 3-piece band to do that, much less
especially when they did those like extended songs in the beginning, where it's just kind of free forming and doing it. Another interesting thing about this band is pretty much almost all the members wrote songs. So it was very much this one. You think you hear Peter Cetera all the time, like he was the main lead vocalist. He was not the primary songwriter, and for a while he didn't assert a lot of control. It was Terry Kath would get a couple, Lamb would get a couple, James Pankow, the trombone player, he wrote a lot of their hits. Believe it or not. So it was really a democratic endeavor. They really were on everyone was on even ground.
I think Pankow was a great I think he was known as a great arranger. And I could totally see that as a horn player, that, to get those arrangements right, that, you would also write a song that would also have to include harmony, with vocals and such. And so, I could totally see.
He wrote some of their big hits. So we're talking about prolific. Their first 3 albums were double albums.
Yeah.
Wait.
Yeah.
Their first 3 albums were double albums.
Yeah.
Their 4th album was a live at Carnegie Hall.
It was a live album.
That was 4 records. And then their 4th studio release was another double album. Who the fuck does this? I'm sorry. So,
there's how much music.
A lot of material, but you got to really be confident, and your label's got to be confident to release 3 double albums, a quadruple album live, and then another double album. And none of them have individual titles. Right. Except for live at Carnegie Hall, but it was Chicago. And the first one was called Chicago Transit Authority. After that, they were numbered through Hot Streets.
Yeah, I actually, first time I heard the first album was when they remastered. It was 2002, I think it was, that they started went back and through the catalog and remastered them all. So I bought the CD, and I had no idea that there was just so much more to this than just just beginnings, and just does anybody really know what time it is? But there's you got free-form guitar on there, which, if you really want to know what Terry Kath is all about, check that track out. It's totally improv. It's weird. But man, he shows his stuff on that, and just the rest of the album is just there's a few covers on there, a lot of material. A lot of material to get through. Yeah. And then, like you said, the next 2 and 3 were exactly the same. Exactly the same.
It's just a wild that the record labels would go on for that too, because that's there's a cost there too in printing that stuff and running it off. Chicago Transit Authority hit number 17 on the Billboard charts, but then after that they started ramping up. Chicago, or which would be Chicago 2, but it was just called Chicago, hit number 4. Mm-hmm. Chicago 3 hit number 2, Carnegie Hall hit number 3, and then the next 5 were number 1s. Chicago 5, 6, 7, 8, and then Chicago 9, which was Chicago's greatest hits, were all number 1. So they just hit like a pace, but each album, like I said, only had like maybe sprinkled 1 or 2 big radio hit singles that we know of. Like I said, there's not the one that we can really point to and say, hey, if you want to hear all the hits, you literally do. In this case, you do have to buy the greatest hits. You do have to get it.
Yeah, the greatest. I mean, it was typically, like I said, like just one song or 2 songs that might have been, that became the hits. But there's so much. Oh man, there's so much to dig into, and it's just so rich. Even when they started, like, I guess when they made that sort of that transition, and that things started to get just a tad bit poppier, throughout the 70s, and even the ballads at that point are so gorgeous. As time went on, they were less of the sort of improv jazzier stuff. But there always was like maybe at least one or two tracks that rocked out that had that heavy, sort of orchestration, if you will, if like the entire band just really kicking in and doing it right up to Terry Kath's unfortunate demise. But
And because he would write, because they would have so many different songwriters, there wasn't one person that asserted control in that aspect. Yeah. So Terry Kath was still writing the heavier, bluesier, grittier stuff, and he'd get at least one or two tracks. James Pankow was definitely writing some of the pop hits, and Cetera was developing into a pop songwriter as well. So, and before they hit that pop stride, they were this was very much like an activist band. They were very politically motivated, very, very heavy on the politics. I think in the Carnegie Hall quadruple album, there was like voter registration information and how to get involved and how to vote. And they were really like heavy into that in the early days. And that kind of defined some of that renegade sound, that they were kind of fighting against the man, and kind of, we're going to have these free form songs and just go where they go and kind of roll with it. And and you said, as you said, over time, the songs start to shorten, they get a little poppier, a little glossier. But in October of 1974, all 7 of their albums were on the Billboard 200 simultaneously.
That's wild.
All 7 of their albums were at some position in the Billboard Top 200. So it's very strange. Like I said, for a band that didn't have those big breakout albums, people were just buying this stuff and just digging it. It seemed like stuff that was in the record, like in the record collection that you would kind of pull out that was somewhat recognizable, but then would go off in these other directions. Like they had that, they would pull you in with Saturday in the Park, and then take you into different directions with all the other free form and abstract stuff that they were doing, which is really, really kind of, kind of a bait and switch. They got more focused in on the pop stuff as the 70s went on. They really honed that in. But in the beginning, they would kind of grab me. I'm like, I'm like Saturday in the Park. And then there's 2 albums worth of stuff that I don't know.
That's right.
I'm like, wait, that was the only song from there,
Yeah.
Let's talk about 25 or 624 really quick. Because back in the day, everyone knew this title of 25 or 624. A lot of different, what does it mean? Is it a drug thing? Is it about work? Is it what is the deal? And it never dawned on me until recently to actually research what it was, what the deal was. Do you know the story of what it means?
I do not.
You do not?
Okay. No, let me have it.
So we're going to reveal that. See, we give you value for your free podcast listening. We're not even charging for this, but this won't show up on our trivia night because we're going to ruin it for everybody. But so the title is, it's got the famous riff, just in case if people don't know, it was like their first hit. And so it's called 25 or 6-4. And what it was about writing a song late at night, right? Because there's the lyrics, should I try and do some more? 25 or 6-4, sitting cross-legged on the floor, 25 or 6-4. What it means is the songwriter is looking up at the clock and it's 25 to 4, 25 minutes to 4, or it's 26 minutes to 4. So it's 25 or 6 to 4. So it's 25 or 26 to 4. So it's like, it's 25 or 6 to 4. It's almost 4 a.m. We've been in the studio all night, and it's 25 or 6 to 4 a.m. Should we try and do some more? Should we keep going? Should we keep recording?
Isn't that cool? You think it's something a little bit more involved,
mystical,
there's some kind of
what
mystique,
is it?
And it's just so simple.
No, they're in the studio. Like, should we keep going?
When should I quit? When should I quit writing tonight?
What time is it? It's 25 or 6 to 4, 25 or 6, somewhere around there. It's late. They could have just called the song "It's Late," and it would have been probably
there you go,
easier to discern. So,
and yet it's one of the most energetic songs they ever did. Yeah, you got a song about writing late at night, and they're just like, this thing rocks to no end, and it's just so,
it's a scorcher, and widely recognized as one of the greatest like solos in there. Again,
even the studio version, if you've heard the live versions, as we spoke of, Dean sent me that YouTube video. I watched it before. And he just goes off on, but even the studio version is just that with that wah-wah pedal kicking in, and just that, and he just keeps it going, man.
Yeah, and he was minimal on the effects, Terry Kath, too. So he was like a pure, like one of those pure guitar players. Didn't have a rack of effects. Kind of
didn't have a rig.
The sound the sound he was coaxing out of the guitar or customizing the guitars. There's a great documentary, called The Terry Kath Experience about his daughter.
Yeah.
Looking into his legacy, finding out what's going on. And there's one of his legendary guitars that disappeared, which was a Telecaster, and he had it modified. He had one of the Telecaster pickups taken out, and he had to put a double coil in, which gave it a totally different sound. Legendary guitar, disappeared when he passed away. Part of the documentary about that is the search for that guitar. I'll put a link to that. It is free to watch on Freevee, which is a subsidiary of Amazon Prime. I'll put a link in there for that too, because that's a really fun watch about someone researching their history, because he died when she was just months old, so she never got to know him. But the things that people say about Terry Kath, he died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. So we'll get there. 1978, January of 78. He had probably, the word is that he was at some point thinking about doing, maybe not leaving Chicago, but doing a solo album, right? Because the fortunes were swinging towards Chicago was getting more popular, but less of the music that Terry Kath wanted to do was there. He was still that rock and roll, bluesy, gritty guitarist, and Chicago was getting more and more radio friendly. So you were hearing more of they were getting known as more of the horn stuff and some of that lighter touch stuff. So supposedly, he was not depressed. He was not suicidal. He certainly battled, he certainly had issues with alcohol and drugs. It was self-aware of it though. But then one morning in January, went to a friend's house. He liked guns just because, it was a thing back then. People had guns. They used to shoot. Chicago had a ranch out in Colorado. I think it was out in Colorado, and they used to all the members of Chicago would go there and live and shoot bottles and that kind of stuff. So it was just kind of like the lifestyle. So he had an automatic gun, was fooling around with it and had the clip in the gun, chambered all of the rounds, meaning he took all the rounds out, took the clip out to show it was empty because he was fooling around with it, and put the clip back in and say, hey, it's empty. What's going to happen? Didn't realize there was still a round in the chamber.
Yeah.
Put the gun to his head, pulled the trigger, and 31 years old, unfortunately.
Died instantly.
Died instantly.
And his friend who was with him at the time told him, put the gun down, man. What are you doing? He's like, no, there's no, it's
empty. It's empty. He showed him an empty clip, and he put the empty clip back in, but there was still a round chambered, which he was not aware of. Essentially, it threw Chicago into a spin. Really, I mean, even though he wasn't the most prominent member, because he didn't seek out the spotlight, but he was the driving force of Chicago. And in 1978, after that, they're ready to break. They're like, what should we do? Of all people, who urged them to carry on?
Who was that?
Fellow trumpeter Doc Severinsen from The Tonight Show.
Really?
He was a big fan of Chicago, obviously, probably because of the brass. They were very friendly, and Doc Severinsen came to the band and said, "You guys should probably, continue. It's what he would want. You really should soldier on." And they kind of took comfort in that, and they heeded Doc Severinsen's advice, and they regrouped, and they put out their first album post Terry Kath. It was the first one that had a title called Hot Streets. It was decidedly disco, and it was decidedly a mess. The loss was felt. They replaced him with I forget one guy for a couple of albums and someone else, and it was just not, the guy's not replaceable. No, so there were either Terry Kath was going to leave Chicago anyway and go on a solo career, or his untimely passing. I think things were going to change anyway.
Yeah, well, I think he wanted to do. He might have just gone off and did his own thing. Maybe that would have been good enough for him to come back to the fold, and maybe not. Maybe they wouldn't have been so prolific in their releasing, because they were putting out albums like one right after the other. So perhaps he needed that break, and perhaps they would have regrouped and did something. I don't know. But to say that nobody, I feel like because of that, they were never the same band again. That's when they started. That was the transition that the 80's were coming in, and it was just like they were a totally different.
Yeah, they on Hot Streets had the one song
sound.
Yeah. They before they got to that glossy sound, they were on their way with Hot Streets had the one song Alive Again, which was a a tribute to Terry Kath. That I Am Alive Again,
Yeah.
which was kind of a minor hit, wasn't anything big, but doesn't really go too well. 1980, they released Chicago 14. It tanks as well. Columbia drops them. Said, okay, it's been a good run, fellas. So things are really starting to kind of collapse.
Yeah.
In Chicago town, in Chicago land, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
19.
In
they put out
Chicago.
another. Yeah, in Chicago. They put out another greatest hits. Columbia says, you know what? You owe us another album. Let's just do another greatest hits of your later stuff. So that would be essentially Chicago 15. 1982 comes time for them to regroup for Chicago 16.
Yeah.
And they're signed by Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers pulls a cheap trick on them and says, we want you to start working with outside songwriters. They also connect with Uber producer David Foster, which was a blessing and a curse at the same time. The glossiness of the 80s came full bore on Chicago. The horns were pulled back in favor of just more ballads. It wasn't a all for one for all type thing. The horns were decidedly pulled back. David Foster was going for more of a pop. I think they were told. I think someone said to them, like maybe someone from the record label, like, who wants to hear horns on a record now? Anyway, like in this day and age, like who wants to hear like it's
most
passe.
of them were synth. They were just like I said, like just accenting, and it was played on a keyboard. They didn't need to pay horn players to come in and do this, because we could emulate this now with all the new,
and they didn't even have it that much. Yeah, it was just kind of like, all right, it's like, so they had Chicago 16 was a big hit for them. A lot of hit songs came off that, but there was a cost involved. It didn't come without them literally losing their identity. I mean, it had, song Hard to Say I'm Sorry was on there. Love Me Tomorrow. They brought in another vocalist, Bill Champlin, to kind of supplant what Terry Kath was doing.
Yeah.
And then Chicago.
What did he say?
What?
Considering what they were and how the whole point of that band was the free form, was just getting that stuff out there and to have this. I don't want to use the term selling out, because I hate that. I don't know. I don't even know what that means, but it's to have to make that decision because you feel like you have to, or you're being told to by the record company. And it's like, you're right. You're losing what you were. What I think it might've been, I would go as far as to say it could have been a slap in the face to Terry Kath in a sense, because he wouldn't.
He definitely wouldn't have been here for that.
There's no way.
Because in 84 they released Chicago 17, which was like the if you want to call it a sellout. I like the song Stay the Night, which was probably one of their last really like kind of little harder edge song a little bit, but Habit to Break was on that. Along Comes a Woman, You're the Inspiration. They were going, they were firmly planted in Light FM territory at that point. Peter Cetera and David Foster had really kind of wrestled control of the band. They really were directing it. And at that point, Cetera is like, listen, I want to do some solo stuff. Why can't we take a page from Genesis? Why can't I have a solo career like Phil Collins and then return to Chicago?
Right.
A la Genesis, right? Because that blueprint had already been, by that point, that blueprint had already been executed quite successfully. That you can be part of a group, have a lot of hits, and then you can kind of go on your own and do stuff and have a lot of hits and return.
Right.
And Fleetwood Mac had done it to a lesser extent, right? They all did their own solo projects, then they would reconvene.
That's right.
Chicago said no, thanks, but no thanks.
So Cetera hit the road.
So Cetera hit the road, which started the acrimony. Then then the revolving door really started spinning faster than Christopher Reeve and Superman, changing into his outfit. They just brought.
And unfortunately, that's when the band just became. That's when they started playing. I mean, they were touring with the Beach Boys. I had seen Chicago with the Beach Boys. And of course, you don't have Brian Wilson with the Beach Boys at this point. You don't have, the best players in Chicago.
And you don't have Cetera. You don't have Cetera.
You don't have Cetera. Like, who are these guys? Like, they're just, you know what I mean? So I've already, by that point, they had just become something that didn't resemble anything of what they were. And
and they did have some hits after Cetera. I mean, that's the odd thing about it too, is they brought in Jason Scheff, who is the son of Jerry Scheff, who was the bass player. He played on LA Woman by the Doors. Yeah. Most notably also known as the bass player for Elvis and his TCB band, Jerry Scheff. So he's a very prolific bass player. So his son, Jason, is a bass player as well. They approach him, I guess he gets a call. Hey, you want to, we're looking for a vocalist for Chicago. But we have someone else that's auditioning too. So it's going to be between, you and this other guy. And Jason Scheff's like, well, who's the other guy? I didn't know this until today. Do you know who they were approaching to join Chicago?
Like
Mickey Thomas.
Oh no.
From Starship and Fooled Around and Fell in Love. Yeah. They approached him first and said, hey, do you want to be the vocalist for Chicago? Mickey Thomas. I'm like, whoa. He would not fit whatsoever with Chicago, but he's a great he's one of the most underrated vocalists, Mickey Thomas. But the fact that Mickey Thomas was in the running and Jason Scheff's like, well, Mickey, how's Mickey Thomas not going to say yes to this? But if you're talking 84, 85, Starship was like, we built this city. They were still kind of going strong. Like, they were on their own path to self-destruction anyway, but they were, they were having hits. They were all these 60s bands were like, just,
they were just struggling to hang in there. And
they were just pushing the controls down and dive bombing into the 80s, just kind of crashing, kind of like, that's right. Kind of like the Enterprise in First Contact.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Crashing down. I mean, the careers were just all these legacy bands like Chicago and Starship had all these really poppy, very unlike their origins hits. Everybody in Starship, like Grace Slick and Paul Kentner, they would denounce all that stuff like years later, like, oh my God, that was crap and what we were doing and Chicago, they were driving these careers into the ground, and then so Mickey Thomas actually passed. He said, "No, I'm kind of doing okay with Starship. We got that song Sarah. We got a couple of hits here, so I'm gonna stay with that." So then Jason Scheff got it. And he kind of is a Cetera sound alike. He's got the same kind of timbre to his voice enough that he could kind of. They had that I forgot what they did a redo on their album, with their first album with Scheff. They re-recorded 25 or 624.
Yeah.
It's like,
okay. So, what the sad thing for me too is not only did they change their sound, but they weren't unique. They changed their sound to sound like
everybody
other
else.
Bands, like everybody else, like Survivor or REO Speedwagon or
all the power ballady stuff.
Exactly. All those kinds of bands, and they're just so generic. So, it's like you're not even trying to do something different. I could understand if you wanted to try to completely change your sound and really believe in it and say that this is something that we're that sounds unique or whatever, but you're not. You just, to me, that's the record company. That is like, no, this is what's popular, so this is what you need to do. And then, I don't know. You just lose your.
I guess you make choices as a band too. Do we?
The integrity's gone.
Like we said in our Cheap Trick episode, like Cheap Trick kind of did it once or twice, and then they went back to what they were doing. Say, we're not going to play that game. We're going to go back and make Cheap Trick music. You're talking about a career. You're talking about a paycheck. What do we do? Do we want to keep recording? If we do, here's the parameters. We got to use some other art, and they did go. I mean, it wasn't like after this, every album had all these different songwriters. The core songwriters did return. Bill Champlin also was a prolific songwriter, so he was recording too, but the sound had changed, right? You could put on something from the 70s from Chicago, like one of their hits, and you would know it was Chicago, like Feeling Stronger Every Day. Like when that song opens, that's Chicago. Like, it's them. But if you hear like Hard Habit to Break, you don't know who that is. You don't know if it's Chicago or somebody, 38 Special at the time, because they had done the same thing. They had kind of sold out a little bit. You didn't know what you were listening to. You just knew it was on Light FM.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you knew you
Yep.
were probably going to hear, I Need a Hero, or, Bonnie Tyler next or whatever. Like,
That's right.
like,
yeah, I
you
mean,
know, like,
pound for pound, you put on like, okay, let's, Hard Habit to Break, or, You're the Inspiration, play that next to,
anything,
even one of their ballads, like, if You Leave Me Now, which is absolutely stunning.
Gorgeous. Yeah.
As a song. It's one of my sister's favorite songs of all time. Just putting those two together, like, and just, okay, what's the better ballad? Oh, come on. There is no comparison there.
Even No Tell Love. I'll put even No Tell Lover, which was some of their even softer stuff from the 70s or early 80s. I'll put No Tell Lover against the glossy stuff, because it just got that. Yeah, David Foster just brought like the icing. He just poured donut frosting all over these records. They were so glossy and so like with the keyboard, those the DX7s or whatever they were.
DX7 coming in.
That fake electric piano sound.
Yeah.
It was just everywhere in the 80s, and if it wasn't used judiciously, you got stuff that sounded really dated. You can use it the right way, but Chicago, God bless them. They had a ton of hits though. I mean, they had most of their big hits during that time, but they didn't have any number one albums. I'll tell you that much. Their number one album run came with their numbers 2 through 6 or 2 through 7.
Yeah. I actually bought 17 on cassette, and I think I listened to it maybe once, and I'm like, because at the time it was like their brand new record.
Wow.
And I wasn't really all that familiar with what they had been doing the last few years, with the 80s stuff, but, just what you heard on the radio. But again, it's like you think, okay, well, maybe there's something on this album that's reminiscent of the earlier, but nothing resembled it at all. Nothing. I can't point to one single song on that album that had any identity, any integrity of what they were, and just that, and
that was back at like 80, came out in 84. That was early days of CDs.
Yeah.
And I remember I bought a CD. I think I probably still have it. It was called Superstars in Digital. It was highlighting like what CDs could sound like. It was put out by Warner Brothers. So it had like Hold Me on it by Fleetwood Mac. It had I Love LA from Randy Newman. And it had Stay the Night by Chicago. And when I listened to it, I didn't recognize it as a Chicago song. Also, because on that song, Cetera's voice is just different. He's singing like not in his Peter Cetera voice, right?
No, he's trying to go higher.
Yeah, it was like a weird, and deeper. Like he's trying to sound deeper also, like on the verses.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
It sounds so strange.
A growl. He's got these like, he does not have that type of voice.
It was
whatsoever.
weird.
That guttural, he's trying to do that. And it sounds horrible. It sounds like
I don't know what he was trying to do, but I'm like, I had to look at the jewel case. I'm like, Chicago, like what?
Yeah.
I was like, all right, let's go with it. This is,
I remember the video. So. I remember seeing the video.
The video is great with the trot. Like he's driving after the woman, like skidding through, doing burnouts in the street, and then the three horn players are like in the pickup truck, and they drive through the sign. They go up, they ramp a tow truck, and they go through the sign, and then Cetera's on the road dying.
Yeah, the model that they used, the actress they used in that video was the best part of the thing.
And they're like standing over him, like as Cetera's like dying on the street after like chasing this woman. And that's when music videos were great, though. So that was like,
they're was entertaining. Right. That's what prompted you to buy the new stuff, though. That's MTV knew what they were doing back in the day. Those music videos really. Oh, like look at the new Asia video. Like, we were waiting for that second album to come out.
Don't Cry.
Don't Cry, and it was great because
that was like Raiders. That music video was like Raiders.
I was like, oh man, this is cool. So you buy the album. The album was terrible, and it's like,
I just listened to that one song.
What a disappointment! Like
I bought the first Asia album. I never got to the second one. Just after Don't Cry, I was like, that was enough.
Not
for me.
worth the wait at all. And when we went to see them, it was even worse. So it was like, oh my god, yeah. So I didn't go back after that. But Chicago too, like nowadays they're like touring like fairs and like small like events and that kind of thing. They're not the band that they were. They're wearing like these like multicolored like champagne or, suits with like, they all had like, looks like they all got facelifts and, they're like
or changed out, I mean,
Yeah.
Jason Chef was with them for a couple of decades, and then he left recently. So now you start with the round robin of vocalists that you're getting.
Yeah. And they made that Christmas album. They put, wasn't that what?
And then most of the like Walt Parazader, who's one of the founders, he left. Like, I'm not touring anymore. Danny Seraphin packed it in a while, well before all this. He packed it in a while ago too. So there was a scale. Robert Lamb was probably the only. I think Pankow and Lee Loughlin,
the only mainstay. Sure,
they may have hung around. So they're basically a touring under the name Chicago with like Robert Lamb, basically, like with no one left. So
right, and he looks like David Foster. Like, now he's got that, just that look to him. It doesn't look like he, like a hippie, like back in the day.
Not the long-haired kid that he used to be.
Long hair, or even like there's no semblance of that whatsoever. They're just, and do not let this stuff fool you guys. I mean, check, if you're not familiar with the old stuff, do yourself a favor and check it out, because this stuff is not indicative of who they were and what, before 78, when he tragically died. Terry Kath, their entire catalog up to that point was just gold. It's just gold.
Yeah. So let's do the rock and roll. Talk about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame really quick. We'll talk about the Jeff Lynne connection, and then maybe we'll select 3 songs that we really like to point people in the right direction. So, of course, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame time comes around 2016. They get inducted. Who doesn't show up? Mr. Peter Cetera, Mr. Angry Man himself, could not bury the hatchet long enough to just go and accept the award and perform just once. Like, they just, like, I feel like a broken record. Like, every time we talk about these bands, like, why can't you just put your shit together put it aside for one night?
As if he, and just the thing of it is like as if he became like really big after he left too. Like, I think he put out like one or two albums.
He had a couple of hits, but then he tailed off pretty quick.
That was it.
He tailed off.
Then what happened? So to have that stance, like to have that attitude, even then, like, I'm better than you. Like, okay,
and he was an original member too. He was there from the beginning. It's like,
right.
Go there, put it aside, celebrate, do the show, rehearse, and then walk away. You never have to talk to each other again. So, all right, let's get to what everybody's been waiting for. Everybody's been waiting since the beginning of this episode for the Jeff Lynne connection here.
Yeah, I'm curious myself.
You don't know it?
I don't.
Really?
What's the connection?
Really? That's very
don't.
interesting. There's a direct line between Jeff Lynne and Terry Kath. And that is Terry Kath's wife, Camelia Kath, who Jeff Lynne now dates.
Oh, okay.
Or may have even married her.
I wouldn't have known that.
So after Terry Kath,
after Rosie Vela,
Jeff Lynne, you got to give the guy credit.
Exactly. Yeah.
After Terry Kath died, Camelia Kath actually married Kiefer Sutherland, and they had a child. They were married for a while. They were married for quite a long time. They had a child, and then they got divorced eventually. Then around 2008, she said, "You know what? I've had the rest. It's time to be with the best." Started dating Jeff Lynne. Now, I was just looking it up today. There's some articles that say they're married. I don't think they got married. I don't think they're married. It's, I think they're just dating, but who knows?
Does anybody even use the term married anymore? I mean, I think
if you do, I hope if you get married, I hope you use that term married, but domestic partner, but I don't think they ever made it official, although, why not? They've been together for quite a while. Yeah. They've been together. So, there's your connection there, that he is, he's taking care of Camelia for Terry Kath and making sure that, and they've been together a while. So I guess they get along famously. And Joe Walsh, there's that whole crew of people. They all hang out together.
Yeah.
They're all like, I want to be involved. I just want to hang out with them. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to pretend I can play music. I just want to hang out with like Joe Walsh, Ringo Starr, and Jeff Lynne and just see what that is like. Because there seems to be like a, Joe Walsh's wife is Ringo Starr's wife's sister.
Right. And now they're related. That's wild. Yeah. It's like, what the hell?
Yeah. When did that happen? Ringo Starr's wife and Joe Walsh's wife are sisters.
Yeah.
Go figure.
So that's crazy.
Joe Walsh.
That's crazy.
We should do an episode, The Wild World of Joe Walsh, and just find like all the stories, just story after story about like what this guy did. Like it would be crazy. All right, let's talk a little bit about music, because we really kind of dragged them, and we haven't really dragged a group like this, but it's a sad tale. I mean, they had great success, so we want to temper that with that success came at a cost. Mm-hmm. The cost was there was a radical change. And again, due to Terry Kath passing away, but again, it might have been inevitable, because like I said, he was already, working on a solo effort, and was probably, even his wife said he was done with horns at this point. He's like, I don't want a band with horns in it anymore. It had run its course. So yeah, they might have soldiered on anyway, and we might be in the same position that we were in. But for people that are looking for stuff, give me 3 songs, just quick off the top of your head, or if we didn't prepare anything, but what would you recommend for people to listen to?
Beginnings is one.
Beginnings, good one.
From the first
album.
Only
the beginning. Yeah, just in case you didn't know that, right?
Yeah. Color My World. Great. I love the slowness. It's like almost like a waltz kind of thing, but it's really nice. It's really good.
It's really a short song. Yeah, there's not a lot to it.
It's a very short song,
but it's great.
It's really great.
Yeah.
By
James Pankow, by the way. Pankow wrote that.
Feeling Stronger Every Day.
Oh, you took one of mine.
Sorry.
Another one co-written by Pankow.
It's a killer.
Yeah.
I also love Does Anybody Really Know What Time It Is? I can go on, but yeah, I'll go with those 3 right there. I'll take Does Anybody Really Know? You can have your
No, you can have that one too. I love Feeling Stronger. I just really like the vibe of it. It's just really, really great.
Yeah.
I'll go with for early Chicago, I'll go with Make Me Smile.
Okay. Yeah.
Because that one is so odd. It's one you've heard, but you don't, because Terry Kath's vocal is so wild in it, you don't associate it with a Chicago song.
Yeah.
It's just, it sounds like something else. It sounds like Chicago, but the guy singing doesn't sound like he belongs in Chicago.
Right.
Baby, What a Big Surprise. That was one of the first songs I ever remember. In the library, they had that album, Chicago. I forgot what number it is, but it's also called Maps, because it's got the map of Chicago on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the opening track. And I used to put that on when we used to go to the library, and that was all I listened to. Like, I only listened to that song. So Baby, What a Big Surprise is a really good one. And from the same album, actually, Old Days, which was written by James. By James.
I had a feeling you
James
picked
Pankow
that one.
wrote that one as also. So check out James Pankow. The guy didn't sing a lick. He was on the trombone the whole time, but the guy could write a song. I'll tell you that much. The guy,
that's right.
Great thing about this
horn, he bent that bone on these songs.
What did he do? He bent that bone.
He bent that bone.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Come on now, get your mind out of the gutter.
Why? That's where it lives. You're gonna evict me? But that's the great thing about this band is that non-vocalists are writing great songs and then giving them to Cetera or whoever and singing it. That was the beauty of Chicago, is it wasn't one person leading it like Steve Miller Band or anything like that. It was kind of like all these guys wrote songs. Everybody got, there was no I never read anything about squabbling about who had this, how many cuts, I want more, no one's hearing me. It was kind of known. Terry, you'll get 1 or 2 songs. Rob Lamb will get a couple. Cetera will get a few. And then if people write, we'll figure out who's going to sing those. Mm-hmm. Really a very democratic band. Really, I mean, they are, really they were in it to win it. Like really one for all and all for one. They did everything together. They lived together. They toured together. They recorded together back in the day. It really was truly a collaborative effort. And that's really what you like to hear about these bands. We've talked about the internal squabbles. But back in the 70s, Chicago was a tight, focused unit, and everybody had something different to bring. That's the greatness of it is the dirtiness of Terry Kath, the brass section. Danny Serafin's sometimes unhinged but really tight drumming, and then Cetera bringing the pop chops and the pop sensibility to it. Mash that all together, and you've got something. Again, you've got a genre of music that didn't previously exist in the late 60s, early 70s.
Right. That's right. I mean, the 70s was, you can't say enough about the 70s. I mean, it always goes back to the 70s.
I guess if we get the DeLorean, that's when you're going back. What are you going to 71?
I don't know, man.
1.21 gigawatts.
I don't know if I'd want to
Great Scott.
relive the
Yeah, but if you could go back now and relive it, like not be a kid. Yeah, but if you can go back, not be a kid, not be the age you were.
Yeah.
But go back now, like as you are now, and be able to appreciate what's happening, like with the knowledge, not be like, oh, I want to be 5 again. It's like, no, meaning go back. I would love
to experience some of the things
that,
be a part of, some of those things. And then, we obviously be more knowledgeable about the music too. So we would know exactly who we're looking for and what we're looking for.
Just start showing up at studios.
Hey there, no.
Be like Forrest Gump, like throughout history, like in all these different recording sessions.
Oh man, I feel like we'd be going to see these shows, like stuff that we've never got to experience. And we've seen a lot of great concerts over the years, but
it was a different time back then.
It was a different time.
Like I said in the beginning, it was a free for all. It was kind of anything went.
Yeah, you go to record Central Park and somebody's putting on a show, like and it could be a free show. And and all these bands would appear and, things like, never mind Woodstock. And, but there was always something like that happening, festivals and things of, that nature. And, but yeah.
Festivus for the rest of us.
Yeah. Yeah. And to experience these bands as they were, just starting out or in their, just not in their prime, but just, the rawness and hearing that.
Yeah, they were hungry. They didn't know what was ahead of them.
I want to hear that, man. I want to hear like, the early stages. I don't want the Apollo like go into a big arena with a big light show.
You just opened up. You just opened up the door, and here it comes. What band would you have liked to have seen in their infancy before they got popular live? I would think you would have said the Who, but
yeah. I never did get to see the Who. Even
but
now,
but see them before.
Oh, I'm sure.
Like before they took, in that raw, unformed stage.
I would have loved to have seen Genesis back in the day, Pink Floyd back in the day, before Dark Side of the Moon. They, Chicago, something like that, or Led Zeppelin. The Rolling Stones, before they were formidable bands. They were gaining popularity, but I would have loved to have seen these bands back then. Like when those great albums, like those masterpieces that we're talking about today, just came out, and they were touring that stuff when they weren't really touring the album necessarily because they had to. So, because they would tour, but you didn't have to play the album either. It was two separate things. You recorded a great album, and then you went on tour. And it wasn't just to tour the record or get it out promoting the record. It was two separate things at the time.
You are correct, sir.
Those experiences would have been cool. Like to see a show and not have to hear the new stuff necessarily, but then go home and then you put the brand new album on and there it is. It's some new material. Cool. So that
there you go.
Yeah. What about you?
I would just say one. I would just, if I had to pick one and say, you're going to go see this band before they get big, even before I was thinking even before they signed a contract, right? So when they're really working it out, I would say the Doors.
Okay.
That must have been something. That must have been something to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
It must have been, equal parts weird, mesmerizing, and wild. Like probably not knowing like you're in this small, because they played these small. It's like these guys were playing big venues. They were playing like bars.
Yeah.
And you
Whiskey
go see see a band, and the guy, it's, with this weird experience. I probably would have liked to see like. As I am now, to go see the Doors and be like, wow, what the hell was that? That was pretty wild.
I almost feel like, though, the Doors did they ever really hit that popularity where, I think they sort of became more popular after the fact, no?
Oh, they had a couple of number ones. No, they were doing well. No,
were they playing were they really playing the huge arenas at that point? Yeah. Like later in the career? Okay.
Yeah, and then once Morrison got arrested, then everybody turned their back on him, and then it became, so they reached the pinnacle, and they were playing those arenas. But then they just became not welcome. After the arrests and all, like they were their own worst enemy. But that's an episode for another day. We kind of started veering off. I asked one question, and you see how it led to just all this other stuff. We would not stop had. If we were not recording, this is how our conversation
talking to the wee hours of the morning. That's right. Yeah,
but that's going to do it for this episode about Chicago. Go check out their stuff. We can make a playlist, but you can easily find one of those on Spotify. There's one called "This Is Chicago." It's got a lot of the newer stuff on it. I suggest instead of getting the playlist, get Chicago's Greatest Hits. It's the one with them on the album cover. It looks like they're painting their logo. Like, go with that. Don't go with the playlist because you're going to get all the newer stuff. And we really advocate to really get them in their purest form, their original lineup when they were all really there of one mind. So go check that out. And since you're on Spotify, well, we've got a whole bunch of other episodes. You can kind of, throw a couple of episodes or two on as that, of that as well. We would appreciate it. As always, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at 3324 Podcast. So you can interact with us there as well. Like I said in the beginning, we do live shows every other week. We do trivia nights, all kinds of fun stuff. Next, we're going to do axe throwing, virtual axe throwing. Figure out how to do that, but everyone's going to need to buy an axe that wants to do it. But
I was going to say we should just go bowling.
There we go.
Just take it to the bowling alley.
Something dangerous like axe throwing. That's the new team building thing is axe throwing. So, but that's going to do it for this episode, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Any other activities?
I'm done talking.
Done talking? All right.
We're done talking.
Eric wants to do bowling. I want to do some axe throwing. We'll figure out what the middle ground is, where Eric throws a bowling ball and I throw an axe at him.
Well, if you throw the axe and chop the bowling ball in half in midair, then you got something going on there.
It splits and makes a strike. So that's we're coming up with new sports as we talk. So that's going to do it for this episode. Before we get too silly, we're going to let you go. And like I said, thanks for checking us out. We appreciate it. You can find us online. You know where we are. You know the rest. You're going to hear it in a couple of seconds anyway. So for Eric, this has been Dean, and we will see you on the flip side.
You've been listening to the 3324 Podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 Podcast and on Twitter at 3324P to join the conversation.